In this video, we'll be looking at the character select screens in 3D fighting games. First up is the granddaddy of all 3D fighting games. And all we need to start is 2 credits. Just looking at this character select screen, you can tell they were showing off, and rightfully so. If you made the first 3D fighting game, you'd be flexing your polygons all day. Each character icon is in a different perspective to show off every angle of these blocky character models. The icons are complemented by big close-ups paired with an animated background. When selected, the character makes an expression. It looks goofy now, but I'm sure this was mind-blowing back then. Instead of stacking the characters on top of each other, they go for a single row layout. We'll be seeing this layout a couple more times in this video, and I'm honestly not a fan. It takes too long to traverse the character select screen, which isn't a problem nowadays, but in the arcade, you only had a couple of seconds to pick a character. A first-time player doesn't have enough time to see everything before having to make a split-second decision. The background is a simple gold gradient. It reminds me of trophy plaques or ginger ale. Something I really like in this character select screen, which is also coincidentally something we're going to be seeing a lot of, is the info about the fighters. Info like this is nothing new, but it was usually relegated to the manual. Putting it in the character select screen is not only a great way to let players know more about the characters, but it also fills the negative space of the character select screen well. For the first 3D fighting game, Virtua Fighter's character select screen is pretty good. It plays to its strengths and uses its space well. Virtua Fighter 2 plays things extremely safe. A little too safe. For some reason, they went back to sprites for the icons and changed the background to a textured silver wall. Other than that, it's virtually the same. The new animated backgrounds for the headshots is strange. It makes it look like the characters are in hell. The sprites aren't the best looking either. Honestly, I don't know why they went from the 3D models to the sprites. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. Virtua Fighter should stick to 3D, especially because the 3D models in Virtua Fighter 2 are a huge upgrade over the first, and it's a shame the character select screen didn't take better advantage of this. Virtua Fighter 3 breaks new ground by introducing not 1 row of characters, but 2. It makes sense. Eventually you're just gonna run out of space on a single row character select screen. Drop shadow is added to the icons, giving the character select screen more depth. Each character has their own colored background, which you can see better in the versus screen. The background is more of a bronze gold mix, and I'm only just realizing that this texture is extremely similar to a default Photoshop texture. The first version of Photoshop wouldn't be released until 2003. I can't help but wonder what they used to add all of these effects. Something so simple now must have been a lot harder back then. In a series first, I think I can say that this character select screen is genuinely terrifying. Now you might think that I'm crazy. How could this be scary? Well, if you highlight on one character for an extended period of time, they slowly but surely start turning their head towards you with their soulless dead eyes. It's just creepy. What more can I say? This is the one time I'm happy that the character select screen has a timer, so I don't have to stare at this any longer than I need to. Other than that, it's same old for the character select screen. Virtua Fighter 3's character select screen is a massive improvement over 2, but I don't think it's better than 1 solely because the background just doesn't work here. Of course, you have the aforementioned horrors I spoke of earlier, and you have a extremely peculiar character select screen. Virtua Fighter 4 is the first game to use a new layout. It's the most elaborate one the series has seen, and it may seem outdated, but I can't get enough of this design style. Even though Virtua Fighter 4 predates it by many years, it reminds me of Windows Vista /7. Although, I remember some Windows XP programs looking like this as well. The use of bevels, edges, and drop shadows, along with the semi-transparency, makes this style distinct, and Virtua Fighter uses it masterfully. The character select screen is sleek and clean, almost futuristic in a way with all of the whites and grays. Yet, it still stays true to those previous titles by keeping things like the info box or the animated blue sky background from the original Virtua Fighter. However, I'm not a fan of using renders over real-time models, but this is something we're going to see a lot of in the PlayStation 2/Xbox era. Rendering these models in real time does take a fair amount of computing power, and sometimes it's just not a priority when you just need to pick your character and go, even if it makes the character select screen look better. My favorite part of this character select screen is the little animation that accompanies the character's name. Just a really cool piece of graphic design. Virtua Fighter 4 would get a revision a bit later titled Virtua Fighter 4 Evolution, and it has a slightly tweaked character select screen. This one gives me a PlayStation 2 vibe. It uses the same colors associated with the console after all. If you really look at this one, it's kind of like an inverse of the original. The original had bright colors and a nice blue sky. This one has dark colors and what seems to be a stormy, cloudy background. I wonder if that was intentional or if this was a happy accident. The little graphic design details are still here. Instead of having cubes appear with names, there's like two little crescents. And when you move around the character select screen, the tiles will flip over. It's a small effect, but oddly satisfying. Overall, this is one step down from the original, but I could see arguments for either or.
Wanna fight again? You're way out of your league!
Last but not least, we've got 2007's Virtua Fighter 5. Straight up, this character select screen is disappointing. When it comes down to it, it just doesn't have much going on. The most interesting thing I can talk about here is the God Vortex in the background, but the rest is just bland. Virtua Fighter's next revision, Virtua Fighter 5 Final Showdown, does this much better. It goes for this techno aesthetic. I don't know how well it fits with Virtua Fighter. I'm not big into the series, but from an outsider looking in, it seems like a weird aesthetic to go for when Virtua Fighter is a lot more grounded compared to other fighting games. Still, I wouldn't call this one amazing, but I'll take anything over Virtua Fighter 5's initial character select screen. Virtua Fighter 5 would get one more revision in 2021, exclusive to PlayStation Plus and arcades. Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown. This character select screen is more in line with modern fighters. It works, but I can't help but feel some of its charm is missing here. Nothing wrong with that, I just wish they got a little bit more creative with this one. Out of the three, I think Final Showdown is the best.
You're no match for me.
Virtua Fighter was quite the journey. We went from three very similar character select screens to radical changes with the last two. This might be a bit controversial, but I think the best character select screen is the first one out of the 5 games. You just can't beat that classic look. With the grandfather of 3D fighting games taken care of, we can look at its much more successful and popular younger brother. The series that brought 3D fighters to even greater heights, the king of Iron Fist, Tekken. Just give me a sec, I gotta swap discs. Tekken's first character select screen looks like the ones we've seen before. We've got the characters laid out horizontally at the bottom and big character portraits filling most of the screen. The background has this marble texture, combined with the bevel around the portraits, and you get this stone carving aesthetic. Like Virtua Fighter, it's clear the devs wanted the 3D portraits to be the focal point, and while they haven't aged well, it's clear they were proud of what they had. This select screen is basic, but can be forgiven because I'm sure they cared more about polishing the 3D graphics over UI elements. So let's see what Tekken 2 has in store for us, shall we?
You win.
Tekken 2 keeps the same layout, but adds details that make it leagues better than its predecessor. The first thing I noticed was the animated elements. There are colored backgrounds behind the characters, and the portrait box pulses with a yellow gradient. This really helps making the portraits stand out. The portraits are much higher quality compared to Tekken 1, and don't look completely goofy. You can tell that the Tekken team has gotten a much better grasp of 3D modeling. The background is slightly different, going from a marble look to stainless steel, which makes everything look a lot more sterile. There's a good contrast between the cool metal background and the colorful portrait backdrops. I think the key factor here is everything on Tekken 2's character select screen is just spaced very nicely and nothing is too big or too small. It could also be that the stainless steel look is less invasive than the beveled marble look they were going with in Tekken 1, and that's what gives this character select screen its edge. I'm honestly shocked how much of an improvement this is over Tekken 1 despite the similarities.
You win.
Tekken 3's character select screen is like a time capsule of the late 90s video game aesthetic. The portraits are displayed on what looks like holograms. The background is now completely animated with this cage texture, making things a lot more busy. There are a ton of sharp edges all around the select screen, combined with the hologram thing they're going for, and you get this futuristic vibe. The characters are now laid out in a more traditional layout due to the sheer number of selectable fighters in Tekken 3. Doing a single row with a large amount of fighters is just way harder, so I see why they went for this. Each character has their own color behind them, and it's even reflected in the portrait above the character icons, which is a nice touch. Red and silver are the two colors that stand out when looking at this, and I can't help but think they chose this color scheme based off of Tekken's brand new series protagonist, Jin Kazama. I love this select screen because it's so in your face while also not being too crazy that it hurts your eyes.
You win.
Instead of jumping directly into Tekken 4, I'd like to take a small detour to Tekken Tag Tournament. Tekken Tag Tournament has every character from the first 3 Tekkens with some extras. This is the first Tekken to have the 3D models of the characters on the screen, and while I like the idea, they fumbled the execution. The character select and 3D models are fighting for space, but are both not given enough space at the same time, making everything a bit smaller than it should be. It doesn't help that there's this huge silver graphic that encapsulates the character select screen that takes up even more space. Like Tekken 3, the background is animated, but this time I feel like it does not match the other elements of the select screen. Not a fan of the plasma vortex. Honestly, it hurts my eyes a little bit. That's this select screen's biggest problem. It just doesn't scream Tekken to me. It feels like they just took a mishmash of elements and there you go. If Tekken 3 captured the feel of the late 90s, Tekken 4 is the essence of early 2000. Tekken 4 switches to a vertical style select screen. The boxes are slightly tilted to give it a bit of perspective. The character nameplates are given this treatment as well, but are also 3D rectangles, giving them some depth. If you really look at the background, it's a bit odd. It's cracked, dirty concrete with clouds behind it, but unlike Tekken 1, at least this blends well enough with the other elements so you don't even notice. The portraits are back to being huge, positioned in big glass panels. Like Tekken 3, the panels and nameplates are affected by each character's specific color. I would say the thing that sets this character select screen apart from others is the music and the announcer. Tekken 4 has a very specific tone that's a lot more low-key compared to most fighters. It's somber. The announcer has this robotic delivery. Combined with the music, it just sends chills down your spine. The only thing I don't like about this character select screen is the select your character text. I don't think it's needed here. Oh, and of course, why is the random icon all the way to the left? What's up with that, huh?
You win.
Tekken 5 goes back to a more Tekken 3/Tag 1 design, and it works great. The first thing I noticed is the background. It reminds me of a wrestling/UFC arena. It's the first Tekken character select screen that actually feels like it's a part of the King of Iron Fist tournament. Unlike Tekken 4, Tekken 5's character select screen is a lot simpler and doesn't have many small details, but that works to its advantage. When I look at this, my brain immediately goes Tekken, likely because the character renders are now starting to look modern. What I mean is the characters look like they look now, more or less. Tekken 5 would get an updated character select screen in Dark Resurrection, and I don't like it, because it looks like the character select screen is in hell with all of the fire behind it. That's the second time I've had to mention hell in this video. What's up with fighting game devs and fire? Too much Final Fantasy VII? But hey, Lily and Dragonov got to be in the middle of the select screen because they were introduced in this update. Pretty neat, huh?
You win.
Please don't tell my father.
Tekken 6 is the first high-definition Tekken. Surely the character select screen looks great, right? I'll get what I like about this one out of the way first. I like that the 3D models are back and you can see your customization on the select screen. And I like that they put gaps in between the groups of characters. It divides the select screen into small points of interest, making the selection process cohesive. The select screen is encapsulated in this round rectangle, and it's styled to that aesthetic that was popular at the time. You know, the one Virtua Fighter 4 had, but this one's a bit closer to what the iPod Touch icons looked like. You know what I mean. It works surprisingly well because it uses the right amount of space. You can see this the best with the random select. It bookends both sides of the screen while filling in the empty space at the ends. Now for everything else. I hate the background for this one. I get that it's supposed to be war themed due to the story of Tekken 6, but it just looks drab. If you could switch out the backgrounds like you can on the main menu, this would have made things so much better. Normally I don't bring up character placement, but it's just a little off here. Lars, Elisa, Jin, and Kazuya, along with the newcomers, are in the middle of the screen. The kings are next to each other. Some placements on the select screen are mirrored, like Anna and Nina, or Kuma and Roger. But then you've got Raven chilling out next to Paul, Devil Jin, and Fang. Or Heihachi just being placed seemingly randomly. At least he's next to Lee. That kinda makes sense. Don't get me wrong, this is one giant nitpick, but it bothers me, so I had to bring it up.
You win.
Tekken Tag 2 has the biggest Tekken roster to date, and I don't think they do the best job of displaying the characters. They could have easily spaced things out like Tekken 6 did, especially if they removed the random Tetris pieces on the left and right. We have the return of the half blue, half red background, but I actually like it here because they're stylized like LCD screens, which is a reoccurring motif in Tekken Tag 2. Since this game is non-canon, it's treated as just one big tournament, and stylizing elements in the character select screen and the rest of the game like this really makes this game feel like a special one-of-a-kind event. However, the best thing about Tag 2's character select screen is the music. I will admit, I'm 100% biased because Tag 2 was the game that got me into Tekken. So when I think Tekken, I hear this song. This theme has so much energy to it, and on top of that, it's just catchy too. Definitely up there with some of the best character select screen music. Is Tag 2 a bit messy? Yeah, but I can't help but love it.
You win.
I have no strong feelings about the Tekken 7 character select screen. The only thing that bothers me is the lack of color variety. The background and icons have the same color scheme, so nothing really pops. I never understood the shattered glass background either. It doesn't scream Tekken to me. Maybe if one half was blue and the other half was red, it would look better. Anyway, one game left, 2024's Tekken 8. I'm not kidding when I say this. I think Tekken 8 is the best character select screen we've seen in years. This character select screen is smaller this time. That is to accommodate the 3D models returning from Tekken 6. However, this time it works a lot better because they're obviously the main focal point that everything is built around. I like that the renders blend in with the red flag in the background. It's a nice way to include them. I love the crowd cheering in the background of the select screen like they're waiting for the fighters to get ready and fight. This one is a love it or you hate it. I've heard both sides on the internet. Some people like the background music, the oh 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 oh, And some people hate it. Me, I'm team O. I don't know, I just find it hype, it's fun. Again, it's just another thing that gets stuck in my head. Tekken 8 isn't that old, so I can't exactly call it iconic, but damn is it catchy. Although I completely understand why you would hate this theme. You know I'm all for the small details, and it looks like Tekken took a page out of Virtua Fighter's book and incorporated character info into their select screen. 3D fighting game characters have always been defined by their fighting style, so it's nice to have that info on the screen. The other info is a bit unnecessary, but hey, now you know that Kazuya, who was formerly Japanese, has relinquished his nationality. Tekken 8's character select screen was a pleasant surprise. I didn't expect it to end up being one of my favorites in a series full of amazing character select screens.
You win.
Je trouve incroyable qu'on puisse obtenir des mouchoirs dans la rue gratuitement.
The Tekken character select screens gradually got better as time went on, and I don't think I can call any of them really bad. Despite complaining about it a lot, I think Tekken 6 might actually be my favorite one, then Tag 2, then 8, and then 4. I honestly think that Tekken 7's is the worst, because we're so late into the series at this point, you'd expect more, but you just got less. Tekken isn't Bandai Namco's only 3D fighting game series, and if I'm gonna talk about Tekken, I have to talk about its sister series. So, I've got one question for you. Does your soul still burn?
Welcome back to the stage of history. Soulcalibur.
Technically, the first Soulcalibur game isn't a Soulcalibur game, but it's a game called Soul Edge, or Soul Blade outside of Japan. It's Soulcalibur in everything but name. Soul Edge's character select screen should look familiar to you because it's almost exactly the same as the first two Tekken games. You can definitely see the limitations of this layout with this select screen. I don't like how close together the character icons are, although I do like the big portraits. You can tell they were done by the same people who did Tekken 3. The background this time feels out of place because compared to the highly detailed 3D portraits and icons, you just have this purple stone-carved background. I mean, it looks better than the marble and steel aesthetic the first two Tekkens went with, but it's really not something that pops into my mind when I think about the Soulcalibur series. Something that I found out by complete accident is the alternate costumes in Soul Edge have their own separate renders. I found that pretty shocking because usually you don't see stuff like this. I really like Siegfried's because you can see his eyes peering at you through the night visor, and I don't even know what they're doing with Voldo. I actually had to stop when I saw this for the first time and really analyze what I'm actually looking at here. God only knows why he's wearing a muzzle and why he has like super zoom binoculars glued to his face and how he's gonna fight like that, but Voldo be Voldoing, I guess. This is actually a feature that would appear in most Soulcalibur games, so shoutouts to Soul Edge for being the trendsetter. Not a bad first try, but it's obvious that this series is still living in the shadow of its bigger brother.
You win.
I will never forget you.
Now we can move on to Soulcalibur proper. The first game's character select screen, like its predecessor, takes inspiration from Tekken, but this time it's Tekken 3. Everything here is very standard, from the animated background to the character portraits and character icons. Like Tekken 3, each character has their own colored background, but instead of it just being a solid color, it's a gradient, which gets a couple more style points in my book. One element that's very important to pay attention to is the details around the character portraits and icons. There's a bit of ornate flair. The time frame between Soul Edge and Soulcalibur was only 3 years, and in that time the renders have improved exponentially. Nowadays, it's a lot less exciting. We've hit the realistic wall of diminishing returns. So it's nice to go back and see a time where the sky was the limit in terms of video game advancement. The background in Soulcalibur's character select screen is mesmerizing. I really like how they have the horizons be darker colors, and then in the middle where the two horizons meet, you have the light cleanly splitting it down the middle horizontally. It creates a nice dichotomy, and it's not too busy to where it'll distract you, or something you'd really notice unless you've been staring at it for the last 10 minutes, like I have. This character select screen is solid. It's very standard with its presentation, but there's nothing wrong with that. Knowing what comes next though, I wanted to skip this one because the next one is one of my favorite fighting game character select screens, but you can't just skip to the good part. It's like when you get a birthday gift, but you have to read the card first. Obviously, you want to open the gift, but you have to read the card first because it's just the nice thing to do. What I'm trying to say here is Soulcalibur 1 is the birthday card of fighting game character select screens.
You win!
The improvement from Soulcalibur 1 to Soulcalibur 2 cannot be understated. It's shocking how much better this one is compared to the first two. The character select screen is laid out on top of this fancy gold background that we saw elements of in the last character select screen. The background this time is eye-catching fire that contrasts with the 3D models of the characters. The 3D models are on full display here, and when selected it'll zoom in and the character will say something. Each character has their own unique pose that not only fits their personality but also their fighting style. You can really tell a lot just by looking at the character on the screen. A detail I definitely have to point out once again is the drop shadow on the character icons. You'll see it a lot in graphic design for text or just elements in general. It adds a certain amount of depth without making something truly 3D. The drop shadow itself is not uniform across the character select screen. They're all rendered at different angles depending on where the character is placed on the screen, which is just another level of attention to detail. You can't talk about Soulcalibur 2 without talking about what happens after selecting your character. On the versus screen, both characters are face to face, and you can press buttons on the controller to have them yell out random stuff.
Versus Cassandra. Versus Shanghua. Versus Talim.
No mercy!
Versus Kilik.
No use!
Versus Cassandra.
line.
Versus Talim.
Not yet!
It's really funny and one of the most memorable parts of this game. Unfortunately, this is the only game that would have this feature. Thankfully, its legacy lives on in Street Fighter 6. Oh, and how could I ever forget the music? When I think Soulcalibur, this is the song. Period. The music is so grandiose and epic. It really makes you feel like you're about to witness a legend unfold right before your eyes. Speaking of legends, Soulcalibur's announcer hits it out of the park. I don't know whose decision it was to give Soulcalibur this type of announcer, but they kill it every time. I could listen to this guy all day, and to be quite honest, if I could have this guy narrate every action in my life, I'd be down for it. This announcer is just fundamental to the soul of Soulcalibur, and I can't imagine a Soulcalibur game without it. Now, there is a bit of a difference between the versions of Soulcalibur 2. If you're not aware, each version of Soulcalibur 2 had their own exclusive character. Link on the GameCube, Spawn on the Xbox, and Heihachi on PlayStation 2. Each of them occupied the same spot on the character select screen, but when the HD version came out on PS3 and Xbox 360, they were able to include Heihachi and Spawn in one version, changing the character select screen. And wow, did they do an amazing job here. It looks like everything has been recreated from scratch, and while it's not one-to-one faithful, I can't help but just look in awe on how great this is. I really wish older fighting games got more remasters. And now's my time to remind you that this version of Soulcalibur 2 is not purchasable, and you had to buy it on the PS3 and Xbox 360 before it got delisted. So yes, Bandai Namco is sitting on a complete remastered version of Soulcalibur 2 stuck on consoles from 2 generations ago. Soulcalibur 2's character select screen excels in design because every element of it just works so well. You take one look at it and it conveys everything that it needs to, and then some. I can confidently say that this is one of the best fighting game character select screens out there. Soulcalibur 2's character select screen is a tough act to follow. So instead of trying to do something completely new, the Soulcalibur team decided to iterate on what they already had. We go back to a horizontal character select screen, although a lot of the elements that make Soulcalibur 2's character select screen are still here. Instead of going for the gold trim, they go for marble pillar that invokes Roman architecture. The character icons remain mostly the same. The background is slightly less epic, just being a nice orange sunset sky. Depending on which mode you select, the sky background will be different. This was also the case in Soulcalibur 2. The fire in the background would change color depending on if you were in arcade versus practice mode. This shows that the developers really cared about the presentation, even down to the smallest of details. The coolest thing about this character select screen is how it transitions between characters. Since we're still in the PS2 era, loading times are abundant, but Soulcalibur 3 had a smart workaround to this. When selecting a character, a smoke outline is loaded first, and then when the model can be fully loaded in, the character materializes. It's a good example of working within your limitations, something we really don't see nowadays because game consoles are basically just PCs at this point. This is also another feature that was in Soulcalibur 2, but I feel like the mist forming the silhouette of the character is a lot more impressive than Soulcalibur 2, which just had a glowing outline of the character. An argument can definitely be made that this character select screen is just as good, if not better, than Soulcalibur 2's, but in my opinion, SC2 still remains king. Nevertheless, this is a great character select screen.
You win!
After we had two amazing back-to-back character select screens, Soulcalibur 4's character select screen is incredibly underwhelming. And by underwhelming, I mean really, really bad. It's extremely static and even regressed in some ways. My main criticism of this select screen would be how the characters are represented. Each character is shown in a small little trading card, and then when you select them, you choose a costume. At this point, the model loads in, and then when you select them, they'll do their special animation and voice line. Not having the 3D model show up when actually browsing the select screen is a real step down from the previous two games. Soulcalibur 4 decides to go back to the vertical layout of Soulcalibur 2, but due to the astronomical amount of characters, everything is just so cluttered. Pair this with the aforementioned card problem, and you have a real waste of space. The background also leaves much to be desired. The background itself is nice, but it has very little going on aside from some fog at the bottom and light rays at the top. I know the last game just had a sunset sky as its background, but even that worked better than this does here. This feels like something that you would see in the background of the gallery mode, not the character select screen. You may have also noticed at this point that I'm missing a character. Well, that's because Soulcalibur 4 has separate characters for each system it was released on. The Xbox 360 got Yoda and the PlayStation 3 got Darth Vader. As far as I'm aware, there is no way to fill up that slot since the DLC has been delisted for years. So, if you never got the DLC, you'll have an eternal bronze reminder staring you straight in the face. Soulcalibur 4's character select screen is just disappointing. If the cards were a bit bigger and, actually filled up the screen, it would be better, but let's be honest here. The cards were just a bad idea and should have been left on the cutting room floor. I don't play Soulcalibur to select cards. I play Soulcalibur to play as my favorite Soulcalibur characters, like Starkiller.
You win! Die, and that is all.
If Soulcalibur 4 was a major step backwards, Soulcalibur 5 is one step forward and two steps back. The character select screen itself has been relegated to this rectangle on the left side of the screen, with character portraits on the right, along with stats and weapons. The background is the best we've seen yet. The two swords meeting each other, combining together while the screen rotates around this cathedral. It's a great mood setter when combined with the background music. I'm honestly surprised we haven't seen many 3D backgrounds, despite the fact we're talking about 3D fighting games. The background is eye-catching and fits Soulcalibur's aesthetic to a T. The way everything is laid out is actually pretty smart. By putting the character select screen on the left and the other information on the right, your eyes are guided seamlessly. You hover over the character, you see the character art, and then you see what stats they have and what weapon they use. This may be a bit controversial, but Soulcalibur 5's announcer is the best in the series. He's so good, in fact, they kept him around for Soulcalibur 6. This time around, he's voiced by Paul St. Peter, a veteran voice actor. His voice just nails exactly what Soulcalibur should be going for. Not convinced? Here, take a listen.
If life is a battle, then a duel is an epitome of one's life. Here, where souls gather, your soul defines everything. The flames of war burn the wills of warriors. Weak hearts are always drawn to one another. Why resist the emptiness? Winds gather at the citadel as the phoenix rises.
See? I told you. Nobody can top that, but feel free to disagree in the comments. Vocal tangents aside, let's get back to the character select screen. My only major gripe with this character select screen is that they removed the 3D models entirely. Even on the versus screen, you only get to see the dinky little cards. I really don't understand why they did this, because if they did have the 3D models, I think this would be right up there with Soulcalibur 2 and 3. This is a good step in the right direction, but is still just a bit shy from greatness.
Messing with me is just stupid.
We've finally made it to the most recent Soulcalibur entry, 2018's Soulcalibur 6. Soulcalibur 6's character select screen is a departure from all the others before it. They go for a circular design this time. The character icons are these pointed hexagons, which is definitely interesting. The characters are laid out in rows that are slightly arched to better fit the circular design. There are a ton of little background details that make this select screen look like something out of an old book. Thankfully, the cards are gone for good this time. This isn't the character select screen's fault, but in my opinion, the character models in Soulcalibur 6 look flat, and I'd argue that Soulcalibur 5 or even 4 have better character models. In terms of design, Soulcalibur 6's character select screen is very creative, but it's held back in a couple of areas, making everything feel cheap overall. There was definitely a genuine effort here to produce a great character select screen, but the only word that comes to mind when I look at this is bland. It just doesn't capture that grandiose feeling Soulcalibur is known for.
In the fires of hell, we shall.
It should be no surprise that Soulcalibur 2's character select screen is the best here, but I would say Soulcalibur 3 is a very close second. 4 and 5 really dropped the ball, but 6 is a step in the right direction. Hopefully with the success of Tekken 8, we will one day see the return of Soulcalibur. With all of those souls and swords out of the way, let's circle back to some good old martial arts with Dead or Alive. Dead or Alive's character select screen is pretty basic. You've got a standard layout and a plain background with the game's logo. It feels very empty and lifeless thanks to the dark colors and metal gradient. It's not very exciting. Dead or Alive uses 3D characters, but like Virtua Fighter 2, they still use hand-drawn sprites for the character icons. Unlike Virtua Fighter 2, I kinda like these, but I'd be lying if I said they didn't feel out of place. The last thing of note would be the info box. Like the rest of the character select screen, it's pretty basic, and looks like something a beginner graphic designer would whip up. Honestly, if they removed the info box and put more of a focus on the 3D models, I think this character select screen would be much better. Dead or Alive 2's character select screen is yet again another iteration of the previous title. The character icons this time, though, are renders. The background is now fully 3D and pans around the stage. I like this because it's a really simple thing to do. They're just moving the camera around a 3D environment, but it gives this character select screen a much more lively feel. The layout is just like the original, but the info box this time has less info and just fits better. The strangest element in this character select screen is the costume selector on the left of the screen. Not a bad idea on paper, but it's just in a strange spot. It makes things unsymmetrical, and that bothers me ever so slightly. If you moved it somewhere else, it would have worked much better. The changes here aren't massive, but they are effective, and make Dead or Alive 2's character select screen more alive than dead.
まさか私に勝つ気でいらしたの?
It's time to leave the arcade behind and step into the world of the Xbox with Dead or Alive 3. DOA 3's character select screen is very clean. It's not exciting or stylish, and it certainly won't knock your socks off, but it's competent. It's professional feeling. I don't like that the characters have been relegated to headshots, but I imagine they did this so they could show off their graphical fidelity. Except there's one glaring problem when it comes to a character select screen like this. I can't see what the alternate costumes look like. Dead or Alive has a big emphasis on the alternate costumes, so this just seems like a boneheaded decision on the developer's part. The info box is the best it's ever been, and I like the decision to move the fighting style to be near the character. I really don't know where else I would put this, and I imagine this is the only time I'll ever get to talk about it, but Dead or Alive 1 and 2 were re-released for the Xbox, and Dead or Alive 1 is pretty much one-to-one, but Dead or Alive 2 is a weird mishmash of DOA 2 and DOA 3. That includes the character select screen, which is exactly the same from DOA 3. I can't think of another fighting game that got a re-release but is mostly based off of a later entry, almost like it's a weird pseudo remake in the newer game's engine. Anyway, tangent aside, let's get back to DOA 3. This character select screen doesn't feel like it was made by a video game developer, but a web designer. It's functional, and it conveys its information clearly at the cost of being boring and not very exciting. Unfortunately, Dead or Alive 4's character select screen is almost a carbon copy of Dead or Alive 3's, except there is one big difference. Can you tell what it is? Since Dead or Alive 4 is on the Xbox 360, it is the first game in HD, so the character select screen has more space to work with. Everything is a bit wider thanks to the bump in resolution, and even though the two are very similar in layout, I think this makes DOA 4's character select screen the better of the two. The new cool blue background helps too. Nothing bad with adding a little bit of color. While recording, I discovered that the background color actually changes. I don't know what causes this, but there you go. A problem DOA 3 and DOA 4's character select screens have is that the load time for the character to pop in is noticeably long. However, that's counterbalanced by the load times in-game, which are lightning fast. I don't know what kind of voodoo magic they pulled off to be able to do this, but I think it's a fair trade to have the character select screen fall behind a little if I can get into my next match a little faster. Again, this character select screen works fine, but I wish they had a little bit more fun, you know? Dead or Alive 5 has a ton of playable characters. I think games with a lot of characters have an inherent advantage, as the large number of characters make things look impressive by default. This one is definitely more video gamey, and I mean that in the best way possible. The background is still static, but they have a fog effect to make things a little lively. What I really like about this is the rough painted edges. When selecting a character, they don't load in right away, but DOA 5 takes advantage of this downtime by displaying a render with some stats. The info box has been replaced with a box that displays certain moves. I don't like moves on the character select screen, there's just not enough space, and what is displayed doesn't tell you much. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I miss the info box. Once you select your character and costume, which is expertly weaved right into the select screen's UI, your character does an animation, and it's off to the races. Dead or Alive 5's character select screen is the best one we've seen since 2, and is refreshing after 3 and 4's less than stellar offerings. Dead or Alive 6 proves it's never too late to change. Dead or Alive 6's character select screen is presented in a vertical layout, breaking the trend of the last 6 games. The layout leaves a lot to be desired though. For some reason, there's just a ton of negative space where the DLC characters are. I'm not 100% sure. I think this game's support got cut early and it was meant to get more characters, but I'm sure someone in the comments knows better than me. The background this time around is of the arena stage with some animated particles. Much better than 5's fog, although I would have liked the background to be in true 3D. The icons are a nice size, showing the characters from the upper torso opposed to the headshots of the previous games. Before a character loads in, a boxing-esque fight card is shown, which has all of the info from the previous select screen's info boxes. This is hands down the best way the info box has been handled in any 3D fighting game. But the best part, by far, is the names the characters get, like Tina, the superstar of 1,000 dreams, or Bayman, the man who overcame death. These cards are like they were pulled right from the tournament itself. Some of these are a bit on the nose though. Like, did they really have to do Brad so dirty? Not only do they call him drunk, but did they really have to list his unemployment status like that? I don't think I've ever seen a character get called out this hard on the select screen of all things. Anyway, everything comes together with the 3D models on the left and right of the screen. Compared to Soulcalibur 6, which came out around the same time as DOA 6, DOA works a lot better because the models just look better. Actually, this game holds up surprisingly well, despite its age. What else can I say? The Dead or Alive developers went all out for this one, and it deserves some real praise for delivering such a good character select screen.
Cheers! Cheers!
And that was the Dead or Alive series. It doesn't reach the same heights as Tekken or Soulcalibur, but there are some real gems in there like Dead or Alive 6, Dead or Alive 5, and Dead or Alive 2. I think that Dead or Alive 6 is my favorite, but 2 is a really strong runner-up. While there's nothing wrong with DOA 3, DOA 4, and DOA 2 Ultimate, having 3 of the same character select screens back to back to back was mind-numbingly boring, but DOA 4 is the best of that bunch. I think for worst, you'd really have to say 1, and 1 isn't even really that bad. I love how video gamey it is, you know? But which was your favorite? For now, Dead or Alive is more dead than alive, but we can keep playing the games, and hopefully one day we'll see the franchise resurrect and become more alive than ever before. And there you have it, the character select screens of 3D fighting games. Out of all the games covered today, my favorite was definitely, well, you probably already know, so I don't even need to say it. But what was your favorite, and out of the 4 series covered today, who do you think had the best character select screens overall? To be honest, I'm inclined to say Tekken because they had more hits than misses out of the other franchises. Compared to the first video, this one was a lot harder to make because I had to bust out a lot of original hardware. I think it was 9 consoles in total, so capturing all of that footage took a lot of time. Now, you may be typing away in the comments right now that I missed a specific big franchise when it comes to 3D fighting games, and what if I told you that this video is only half of what it was originally supposed to be? I have an entire 9 extra pages that had to be cut because if I didn't, I would have never gotten this video out in a timely manner. Plus, I'll admit, I was kind of running out of things to say in those 9 pages, and I started to go a little crazy, so I had to cut it short for my own good as well. If you're not sick of character select screens at this point, please let me know what I would cover in a completely hypothetical part 3. I mean, it's not like I'm sitting on 9 pages of unused script ready to go or anything. Also, let me know if you prefer how the first video was, where I highlighted specific games in a series, or how this video was, where I covered every game in a series. I'm genuinely curious to see which one people prefer. Regardless, thanks for listening this far. You're amazing. Anyway, thanks for watching, and bye for now.